Hey guys, welcome. This is Marcus, and if you're staying with me, we're gonna create a stunning 3D map animation showcasing the route from the base camp south up to the top of the Mount Everest. So we're gonna create a 3D landscape based on real-world data and satellite imagery. We're gonna import and work with GPS data in the KMZ format. We're gonna create our own labels, and we're going to bring it all together. To get this done, we'll need GEOlayers 2 and Trapcode Mir. Now, let's start from scratch. To get this done, a good starting point is our elevation template project. And to find GEOlayers sample and template projects, you're going to open the projects panel. Right there, we can find all our projects. So the one we need is Elevation HD. So I click it and GEOlayers is going to download it for me and it will open it. There we go. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save it on my desktop right there. The project comes with a little help that you can see on top here. Let me just remove this, and I will also remove the label right here. So the project consists of 3 map comps. There's the texture map comp, which is a 4000 by 4000 pixel map of Bing imagery. There is a height map, which is using maps and height data. And there's a control map comp that is keyframed and which is inside our 3D landscape composition that holds the mirror layer. So the mirror layer is on that one. Apart from the mirror plugin, you can find some project settings here. So we can, for example, boost our elevation a little, make it flatter, whatever. I'm gonna leave it at 1. We can adjust the dust color, the sky color, the sun color, because we have this little sun and lens flare here, and we have this auto camera elevation and an elevation slider. I'm going to talk about this a little later. So the first thing we want to do is we want to import our track, our GPS track. So I have a KMZ file here, and I will simply drag it onto the browser here, and GEOlayers imports the KMZ, and there's like a lot of stuff inside. There's a lot of point features, and there's some tracks. And what we need is base camp south. So I'm gonna filter for south. And all right, we need the Mount Everest summit, of course. I'm gonna drag it to my favorites. We will need the track BCS, which is base camp south to the summit. I'm gonna drag it to my favorites. And we want to have the base camp south itself as a point. That's all we need. I remove the rest of the file, and I'm going to rename those. I only want the name, and maybe it's elevation. There we go. You can find a download link of a GeoJSON holding those features in the description. Now let's get started. I'd like to change the location of our wonderful 3D landscape here. So I simply select the Basecamp South feature, and I want to click this little frame icon here. So this will jump to my selected feature. And if I hold Control doing this, it won't adjust the zoom. So this is pretty nice, since the Basecamp South feature is just a point. It would zoom in very far, which I don't want. There we go. GEOlayers changed the location and downloaded some preview data for the new one, which you can see here. So it's all very low quality, but that's cool for me to work with. And the project itself does one more thing. If you leave this checkbox, auto camera elevation on, GEOlayers will adjust the camera elevation according to the height map. So when you jump from location to location, it's going to always fit. But This is a little resource intense, so I won't check it when I'm animating, and I encourage you to don't do it when you're animating. So just remove it and adjust the height of the camera yourself. We will also animate the camera height, so I'm gonna go here for 500, which is pretty good. Now the next thing I'm gonna do, we have this rotation of our 3D scene here in the camera angle. I'm gonna remove those keyframes and we're gonna create a map animation. So we're gonna animate the location of this map. So I'm going to 5 seconds, which is our starting point at the Basecamp South. I'm gonna click the little keyframe icon here, and our control layer has now its geo position, its latitude, longitude, and the zoom keyframed. And I'm gonna go to 15 seconds. I'm gonna select the Mount Everest summit here, and I'm gonna jump to this feature, again holding Control or Command on Mac. There we go. That's the exact geo position of the Mount Everest. Now our camera height hasn't adapted to the height map. So we're gonna keyframe it. I'm gonna set a keyframe at the start of the animation, and we will rise it to the end. There we go. And at the end, I'd also like to zoom in a little bit more. By holding Control or Command, you can zoom in smaller steps. Cool. Now let's quickly ease this, and we have our first map animation. I'm going to quickly preview this with a very low resolution. There we go. Nice. Now the fact that this button is blue tells us that the mapcoms are not finalized yet. That means they hold preview imagery in a low quality. So to download the high quality imagery for the height map and the texture, I'm going to click the Finalize button. And what GEOlayers now is doing, it's downloading imagery tiles from Bing. And those tiles are going to be stitched to 1024 by 1024 pixel tiles. I'm just going to place them in our texture comp right here. So we have a very high-res texture map for our mirror layer. Now let's add our GPS track. So what you want to know is, if you add an element like drawing a GPS track or adding a label or anything, GEOlayers will always add it to the mapcom or connect it to the mapcom that is selected in the mapcom bar up here. So to get our track displaced with the Trapcode Mir layer, we're going to draw it onto our texture. So what we're going to do is we select our texture mapcom here. By clicking it, GEOlayers will open the containing comp of our texture mapcom. And now I can easily select the style and draw the track. And we're going to see it right here. I'm going to adjust the width to 10 pixels. And this track is now visualizing our route to the top of the Mount Everest. Now what I don't like, in the middle of the animation, the track is like hidden behind this mountain face. So we're gonna animate our camera a little. The project has two camera control layers, which is the camera tilt and the camera angle. So the angle just rotates the whole scene, and the camera tilt. So let's begin with like a value of 70. And I'm setting the angle at our starting position to maybe 50. setting a keyframe for the Z rotation of my angle and the X rotation of my tilt layer. And what I also might adjust is our camera elevation. I'm going to select those layers and hit U to just reveal the keyframe properties to make this a little better to look at. In the middle of our animation, I'd like to change the angle of our scene rotation, probably a bit like this. And as we reach the top, I would like to rotate it a little like that. And I'd like to change the tilt so that we kind of look back to our starting point. I like that one. After we reach the summit of the Mount Everest, I'd like to rotate the camera a little bit more, so I will turn it a little further here, and the same thing on the start. Now to make this nice and smooth, I'm gonna open the graph editor here and just pulling our Bezier handles out, holding Alt like this. Nice and smooth. And now we have a nice animation curve that will look awesome. Same thing with our tilt. Probably like this. What I'm also gonna do is get my camera a little bit more into the scene. So I'm changing this to -2200 probably. And now this looks how I wanted it. Let me give you a little hint. The less keyframes you use, the smoother your animation is gonna be. So just add keyframes really at points where they're necessary. If you want to check out how the final render will look, just have a look at the 3D Landscape Render HD comp. Now this looks pretty awesome. Let's have a look at the top. One more cool thing we can do, because we have that lens flare of the sun, and if you unshy all the layers, you're gonna find the position of the sun, and you can change its Z rotation. That we can simply have it a little in our frame, which just looks nicer if we do our animation and there's some lens flares going on. But I'm going to shy all those layers that we don't need again. Now let's create some labels. If you right-click label template, it will reveal it in your project. So you're going to see there's not a lot happening in here. I don't want to have that written label. So I'm going to remove this composition right here, and I will add a label template instead. And GEOlayers is going to create a new composition inside here. It will use some default aspects for the composition, but we can of course change this. So I'm going to make it 200 by 200, and the feature name is nice like this, but I'm going to remove it, and we're going to use a text box, so that GEOlayers is going to do line breaks when the text extends a certain length. So let's just call it feature name. I actually don't want it in capitals. GEOlayers also added a null that is called label anchor point, which is important when it comes to labels, but if you want to get more in depth with this, please watch the label templates tutorial. For now, I will simply create some circles. I'm going to size down the circle just a little right here. And I'm going to reveal my scale property, jump 10 frames ahead, set a keyframe, 10 frames back, scale it to 0, and I'm going to select last keyframe, ease it, and change its velocity to about 100. Like this. That looks smooth. Now I'm going to duplicate this layer. I will add a little offset in time. And for the one on top, I will just keep the stroke. And for the one below, I will just keep the fill. And I'm going to change the width to 2 pixels here. And I'm going to size down this a little bit further. Like that. I'm going to take my scale animation and apply it to my text layer, offset it a little, probably a little more, and there we go. I'm going to size down my text box a little more, like that, and call the label circle label. There we go. To make the labeling process as fast as possible, you can lock all the layers that won't be touched by GEOlayers. So the fact that this layer is not locked is going to tell GEOlayers that it will insert the feature name right here. Okay, our label template looks fabulous. Let's add those labels. As I said before, GEOlayers will add elements to the map comps that is selected in the dropdown here. So I'm going to select the control map comp because this map comp sits in the containing composition that holds our whole scene, right? Our mirror layer is here, the scene setup is here, everything is here. So I'm going to select that one, select the feature I want to label. Again, select my circle label. There was the old name on top. Doesn't matter, but GEOlayers always updates the labels from the project when you open the dropdown here. So I'm going to select my circle label and hit the label button. Oops, you can't see it anywhere, but this has a simple reason. The label is there, it has been added, but the thing is, the label sits down there below at an elevation of 0. So this is exactly where our control map comp is, because it is attached to this control map comp, just for your understanding. So what you want to do is select the label and you have the geo position there, so latitude, longitude, and height, and you can change the height that it fits our starting point here. Now this label should appear a bit earlier. And we have a second label. Which we want to appear when we reach the top. So I select the Mount Everest summit, hit the label button again. Same thing, change the heights. Awesome. Now I don't want to have that Basecamp South label when we reach the top already, so simply when it is out of the frame, I'm going to trim this layer here. Now the last thing I'd like to do is animating our track. So therefore I open my texture comp right here. I select my track shape layer. And beneath the contents, I'm going to click the little arrow here for adding a trim paths property. And what we want to do, we want to start our animation at 5 seconds. So I jump to 5 seconds. expand the trim paths properties here. I'm going to set a keyframe at the end and set it to 0%. And I want it to end right here at 15 seconds. So I'm going to move the playhead to 15 seconds. Again, to go to my texture comp, and change the percentage to 100. Now, that's all you need to do to animate a path in After Effects. So like this. You see the buildup of this path, and you can see the map animation that we have keyframed on the control layer. And that's it. Let's RAM preview this to see if the timing matches. Very nice and smooth. We can follow this track along up to the top of the world. Now what I'd also like to do is I would like to blur everything that's behind this label. So I'm going to create an adjustment layer. I'm going to make this layer the size of our label, so 200 by 200. I'm going to create a circle mask on it by just double clicking the circle symbol right here. I'm going to add a fast blur. There we go. Click repeat edge pixels and select maybe 6. No, probably 5 is enough. And all I want to do is I want to set it below our label. I want to parent it to my label and change the position accordingly. There we go. I like the look of this. I'm going to call it blur. I'm going to duplicate it, parent it to the top label, and adjust its position again. There we go. Awesome. Now, last but not least, let's have a look at our color grading. So I want to have this look a little colder and creepier up there. So in our render composition on the 3D landscape, there's some effects going on. So we have a pre-blur, which will make our mirror layer look less like CGI and a bit more like film. We have some grain applied, some noise, and we have this lumetri color effect. And if you expand the creative group here, you can very easily change the look by applying another LUT. And what I want to have, I want this to be cold. So I select blue steer right here. And now this looks really nice and cold at the top here. And we have also a very beautiful image with that sky and the sun down here at the base camp. Now that's it. I'm going to send that one to the render queue, and we have done a stunning visualization of a route from the Basecamp South to the top of the world, again using real-world data with GEOlayers 2.